The sheriff isn't an independently elected official anymore. The sheriff doesn't answer to the voters. The sheriff answers to a politician. And the voters allowed that to happen. So yes, when the sheriff makes a decision not to enforce something like the camping ban, that decision is coming from above. This segment is brought to you by Eastside Weight Loss Clinic. I'm down 37 pounds on the program, and I lost most of that in just 2 months. Do what I did and what so many other unDivided viewers have done. Schedule your free 15-minute consultation today at eastsideweightlossclinic.com. The city of Burien is dealing, like a lot of cities are, with a severe homelessness issue. And they've been sort of ground zero for this with former Burien city council members trying to encourage homelessness and homeless camping on certain public areas. And there's like literally there was an effort from former city council members to have more homeless tents near City Hall. So it's been this big back and forth. Well, the city of Burien, like a lot of other places, said, look, we are going to say you cannot have camping in public places if there is shelter available to you. Simple. You can't put your tent here because we have a shelter available to you. And if you don't want to take the shelter that we have for you, then you've got to move somewhere else. Well, now, who would enforce that? The King County Sheriff's Office, which contracts its services to the city of Burien. But now that we have a King County Sheriff that is a political appointee under Dow Constantine, you have the sheriff's office saying we're not going to enforce this ordinance in the city of Burien. So here's the article that first came out from our friend Jason Rance. The headline, King County Sheriff directs deputies to ignore Burien encampment ban. The appointed King County Sheriff instructed her deputies to ignore an updated Burien ordinance that prohibits a homeless encampment within 500 feet of locations with vulnerable populations such as schools and parks. She did not inform city officials, leading the mayor to accuse her department of acting politically. Citing concerns over the constitutionality of the ordinance, King County Sheriff Patty Cole-Tyndall directed deputies Friday morning not to enforce it. Cole-Tyndall did not inform Burien city officials, including Mayor Kevin Schilling, of the decision. Council members were reportedly caught off guard, some first learning about the memo when the Jason Rance Show on KTTH reached out for comment. And this was confirmed by Sam Campbell, who's a reporter at Kyra Radio. He goes out to the city of Burien and he's out, trying to talk to people who are living in tents, who are homeless, when a King County Sheriff's deputy is called to the area. And Sam Campbell asks him, just to be clear, are you going to enforce the ban on camping? Here's what he said.
Just to be clear, make sure I heard correctly, that the part that won't be enforced right now is which part?
The actual camping. So
okay.
Trespass can be enforced if it's up against the building.
Okay, so they just got to be away from the building?
Yeah.
And so it was sort of validation of what Jason Rance had reported. And also, you just have to go down to the city of Burien, as our friend Jonathan Cho did, to see that it's not being enforced. There are tents absolutely everywhere. And it's not just about people just living in tents, right? It's about everything that comes along with allowing these encampments to fester. It's about the impact it has on businesses. I mean, who wants to visit one of those businesses when there's a whole long line of tents in front of it? And then it's also about the criminal element that, yes, comes along with the transient population. Drugs everywhere. There's been an uptick in crime in areas where encampments are. Uptick in drug use equals uptick in crime because you have to commit crime sometimes in order to fund your drug habit, so stealing from businesses. And then when you're on drugs, you're more likely to be violent and dangerous and unhinged. So here you have a situation where the city of Burien has passed a common sense ordinance that is in line with federal court rulings like the one out of Boise, Idaho, that said, that one was specifically about you can't just ban people from camping somewhere unless you have shelter to give them. So the idea with what you see a lot of cities doing is, okay, we're banning camping as long as we have shelter for you. So that seems constitutional to me and in line with federal court rulings. If you have a shelter for someone, you offer it to that person and they won't take it. No, you don't get to camp on the sidewalk in our downtown corridor where you can shoot up drugs. You don't get to do it. So now you have a situation where the City of Burien is the entity that is dealing with the consequences of the King County Sheriff's Office, which is contracted with that city to provide law enforcement services. They get to deal with the consequences of an appointed sheriff not wanting to follow or enforce or have her deputies enforce the ordinance. And in case there's any question in the world about where that directive is coming from, that it's not coming from the sheriff. It's coming from her boss, the King County executive. Again, it's coming from a politician who now controls the office of the sheriff because voters decided that was a good idea. Our friend Jonathan Cho got his hands on an internal email from the mayor of Burien, Kevin Schilling, who, there was some emails going back and forth about all of this and trying to get to the bottom of it. And the mayor noticed that a response about this was coming from the comms director for the county executive. He wrote, "Why is the comms director for Dow Constantine responding to press requests on the topic of the sheriff?" Well, that is because the executive's office now controls the sheriff. The sheriff isn't an independently elected official anymore. The sheriff doesn't answer to the voters. The sheriff answers to a politician, and the voters allowed that to happen. So yes, when the sheriff makes a decision not to enforce something like the camping ban, that decision is coming from above. So it would make sense that it's the PR flacky for the executive's office who's responding to a city's questions directed at their sheriff's department about, hey, we have this ordinance, why aren't you helping us enforce it? The city also did issue a more lengthy response saying that they do believe that this is a violation of the agreement they have with the King County Sheriff's Office to provide them services. It says, the King County Sheriff's Office has advised its deputies against enforcing Burien's public camping ordinance, which is a breach of the interlocal agreement for contracted law enforcement services provided by King County to Burien. According to the contract for services, if there is a disagreement regarding a contracting city's, quote, procedure, policy, goal, or operation, the solution is not unilateral action by King County, its sheriff, or members of the sheriff's office. Rather, the parties shall negotiate to reach a final determination. And that makes sense, right? That you wouldn't have, if you've got an agreement as the sheriff's office to serve a city, that you wouldn't just say, oh, we're not going to enforce this law and this law and this law and this law, and we're not going to tell the city about it. Because that, to me, is the worst part, right? If you have the sheriff that genuinely has concerns about the constitutionality of Burien's law not to allow homeless camps to proliferate, then what would be a common sense way to deal with that? What would be a way you and I would deal with a disagreement? The sheriff would go to the mayor and to the city council and say, hey, we've got a concern about whether this is constitutional. I don't want my deputies to be in a place to have to enforce something that's unconstitutional and open all of us up to lawsuits. So let's talk through what we should do. Is there a way you can tweak it? Is there something we can do moving forward? No. Instead of doing that, you go behind their back, stop enforcing it because your buddy or your boss, the King County executive, told you not to do it. And then the city is left wondering what the heck is going on? Why are all these tents here? You're supposed to be enforcing this. This is government at its worst. And this is what happens when you don't have a sheriff that's accountable to the people. If the sheriff was accountable to the people, I guarantee you the sheriff would have gone to the city and said, hey, I'm concerned about this. What can we do? How can we make sure that the city doesn't have tents proliferating everywhere with drug use and crime, while also making sure that we're not enforcing something that's unconstitutional? But I would also, argue and push back against the whole, oh, this might not be constitutional thing. Again, when it comes to the federal decisions that are on the books, it basically says you can't prohibit camping unless there's, shelter available elsewhere. Well, who do you think is responsible for making sure that there's enough shelter for the homeless in King County? King County. King County Executive Dow Constantine. So if there isn't shelter available, even though we spend billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars, if there isn't shelter available for the homeless in Burien, whose fault is that? Dow Constantine. He's been the executive now for almost 16 years. So if the reason why Burien can't enforce its no camping ordinance is there isn't shelter for some reason for those people who are setting up tents in their business core, That is Dow Constantine's fault. So you have Dow Constantine and people with his ideology who create a homeless crisis that is so bad, that is so severe, through their lack of enforcement, through hands off on drugs, all of these things. And then they convince people to give them billions of dollars. Hey, we got to fix this crisis that we created. We need billions of dollars. We'll buy homeless hotels. We'll do all of this. We'll give money to our cronies. Oh, well, then it turns out that that's not even working. The homeless crisis is still just as bad as it was. And you've got some of these homeless hotels that just sit vacant. Oh, well, gosh, now we've created a homeless crisis that's terrible. We asked you for billions and billions of dollars. We absolutely squandered it because the homeless crisis isn't getting any worse. And now cities like Burien just have to deal with the consequences, and we're not even going to allow our sheriff's office to help them keep homeless tents off the sidewalks. And these are the people who we keep putting back in office. It's truly mind-boggling to me. So the city of Burien does not look like it's backing down from this showdown. And I truly hope they don't. I hope they find a way, I don't know how, to enforce this ordinance, to push back. I mean, hell, if they want to sue the county, I don't know what it is. But they have made it clear that they believe this is the best policy for their citizens, to protect their community, to keep their community safe and thriving. And now they're at the mercy, so to speak, of a political appointee and a sheriff, because voters chose that route. And they've got to figure out, how do we stick to our guns when everyone above us is working against us? So the city of Burien, we have your back as much as we can. But I think it is a good example for them to set, to be pushing back against this Seattle ideology that is making their community less safe and that is keeping them from carrying out common sense policies.